Good evening, everybody. This is Renata Nixon. My video is on Chapter 12, Energy Legislation from the OPEC Embargo to Obama Sidestep of Congress. I apologize that my video is late. I have been out of town for the past 2 weeks for work, and I'm just a little behind on my homework right now. So I'm trying to catch up. So here goes. So this chapter addresses congressional efforts to address energy policy from the oil embargo of the early 1970s to 2011. So Oppenheimer does a review of the energy policy change process from the 1970s to the Obama administration until 2011. And he attempts to answer, is the process and policy linked? And if so, how, right? With this issue, with this chapter, the major issue is that Congress has been reluctant to enact major policy changes in regards to energy. And with energy issues that so narrowly divide the public, interest groups, and members of Congress, significant policy changes were only achieved in times of crisis. So through all that time, it took major crises for presidents and Congress to pass energy legislation. And one of the things that I would like to read to you from the just straight from the book, because I thought this was really interesting of what he wrote about the congressional policy struggle in general, right? So not even related to energy, but he says that we are well served to remember that the congressional process lacks closure. Even when a major piece of legislation is finally enacted after years and sometimes decades of delay and defeat, the struggle is not over. In addition, formal and informal oversight, the normal hurdles of annual funding and periodic reauthorization arises. And in addition, the formal and informal oversight may raise questions about how effectively the legislation is working. Events may affect the underlying issue that the legislation was meant to address, and new elections can produce different partisan and ideological balances in Congress, altering the support for existing programs. Unexpected economic conditions may affect the public use of the program and the ability of government to pay for it, and changing demographics may influence the level of public support for it. And even if none of these things happen, compromises that were required to pass the legislation often means that Congress left some issues for subsequent Congresses to face. So Oppenheimer notes that the study of congressional efforts to develop energy policy goes far back as 4 decades, right? With multiple pieces of legislation, there is several presidents, Congresses with different parties in control, different levels of party strength and loyalty, and during periods of shortages, rising prices, energy surpluses, and falling prices. So good, bad, and the ugly, it covers everything. So in the chapter, he discusses the aftermath of the OPEC embargo, the efforts to enact the Carter Energy Program, 2 decades of energy policy which remained in the back burner, so there was no policy, and the struggle to enact energy legislation during the 2001 to 2005 period. And he also discusses how the Obama administration, to solve this congressional blockage of energy legislation, how it interpreted its authority under the 2010 law to set CAFE standards far beyond what anyone might have anticipated when President Bush signed the legislation in 2007. And so one of the things that he notes is that there were many issues that were present in the OPEC time that is still present today, right? So the particulars may have changed, but the issues are still there. So some of the issues are, for example, some of the big issues center around the question, what is the best way to make the United States less dependent on foreign sources of energy? How can we mitigate economic impact of rising energy costs? How should government intervene in the marketplace? And how much concern should we be paying to the environmental impact, of these energy sources? So, these questions remaining unanswered does not mean that Congress has not made legislative decisions. However, the big questions, are still largely unresolved even today, and even after many years of legislation, through all the presidents and the Congresses, of course. And so one thing has also remained constant, which is what I mentioned in the beginning, is that, legislation has only been passed in emergency conditions of rising energy prices or threats to supply. Was it possible to make major policy adjustments? And, you can see that during Iraq War, Gulf War, and when we invaded Kuwait, when at that time is when the OPEC collapsed. And so throughout the 1980s and 1990s, neither public pressure nor political leadership of the Congress or the executive branch was sufficient to make anything beyond incremental changes in national energy policy. And so the cost of, decades of inaction during at least 2 of 3 presidential administrators, which actually opposed active government involvement in energy policy, the United States remained as dependent on foreign energy supplies as it had been in the 1970s when this whole thing started. So then we enter, I just want to mention one thing that he mentioned that was really interesting was that, even during the Bush and Clinton administration, and he particularly mentions, Bush administration here, is that, it took like 5 years to pass an energy bill. And he says that Congress did play a role in the process, but their role was to block and delay policy change. So their role for 30 years has been to block and delay policy change, even when energy was a hot issue, with the public. So when the Democrats won the House in 2007, the House and the Senate in 2006, they came and faced the same problems that the Republicans encountered in trying to pass energy legislation during the Bush administration. And with Obama, Obama actually made major changes regarding energy policy. And how did he accomplish that, right? So first of all, he sidestepped Congress. His 2 policy changes were the 2009, and this is the first increase since 1975, so you can see how outdated it was. He increased the combined fuel standards, and in 2011, that increase was announced for cars and light trucks. And the agreement was arrived without legislation. So, car companies, competitors, they all worked together to, achieve this change. And then even the Department of Transportation and the EPA signed the documents that were required for it to be published in the Federal Register, making it into law. So in conclusion, the ability to use features of the congressional process to block the passage of legislation exists to varying degrees over time. And the hurdles, absent a crisis, it has, absent a crisis, enacting legislation has been quite difficult. And the hurdles that the congressional process has created for the enactment of energy legislation has varied over time. It may be easier to pass energy legislation in the conditional party government than it was in the subcommittee government. But unless there has been an ongoing energy crisis of rising prices, shortages, or both, Congress and presidents have been reluctant to act. And So it wasn't surprising that, arriving in this environment, that the Obama administration pursued new avenues to achieve policy change on energy. And lacking the ability to alter the congressional process, the Obama administration chose to bypass it when possible by interpreting existing authority broadly and working with the full range of interest group players to produce acceptable outcomes. Thank you for watching my video, and I look forward to your comments. Good night.